All right. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm swell, thank you. And you, Monica, how are you?
I'm swell too. I'm really excited that you and I get to come back and we chat and talk about how's life been with COVID. Um, we've been working on the project together. I hear the discussions you have with everybody else, but I'm just excited for this opportunity to hear specifically how Mark's doing and how you've changed.
Well, and vice versa. I want to I want to hear from you too. And of course, all over this time, we can't pretend as we have this conversation that we haven't been talking all along. Um,
Right, but we haven't had too many opportunities just to sit down with just you and I.
right.
I mean, just really quality interaction. So, uh,
Well, to put this in some context, we've been having weekly meetings almost every week on Friday mornings. In fact, before this one, our talk here, and it's what's the date today? The 18th of December, 2020.
mhm.
So on our way to Christmas and on our way to about 9 months with this program since we started at it. And one of the really best things about doing this program is that the people who are involved in it, we all get together and talk, and it's not just about what do we do about the program, but there's always time to say, and how are you doing? We have from the very beginning put a lot of emphasis on the human and emotional side of all of this. I mean, that's what the video project's about anyway. But, we know a lot about it. And we know a lot more about each other from going through this together. Um, so what would I say? Well, you know that during this time in August, I moved to the Chicago area from Colorado, from Greeley. And
In the
so
middle of a pandemic, you chose to do that.
I chose to do that.
Mhm.
And so for me, there's the isolation of the pandemic. And it's even more so for me in working on it, though I have, of course, connections here in Chicago. Um, but it's even more so. And the isolation has been, in that sense, even more so. I don't just have my little home in Greeley that I can walk out the door and wander around my neighborhood and go to Glenmere Park and so on. By far, the hardest thing about it, and I'm very well connected here in Chicago and living with somebody I really love. But by far the hardest part of it is my children are in Phoenix and Seattle. My grandchildren will have passed their 3.5 and 4, and I'll have missed 1.5 years of their lives. We talk on the phone, we Zoom some. Um, that's the hardest thing for me. Um, on the other hand, um, look at how lucky we are. The Nancy, the woman, my partner, and the people I love here, nobody is sick. Um, we can all feed ourselves. We're all comfortable. Our children are all doing okay. Our grandchildren are all doing okay. Um, so, to quote my great aunt Elke, uh, it could be voice. Uh, and actually, one of the things I've loved is working on this project because it's kept me not just with something I think that's really important to do, but also connected to Colorado and connected to, I lived there in Greeley from '85, and I'd lived in Yuma too for 2 years in the late '70s. Um, so I've been able to stay connected, and that's been so important to me at this time. So I've been so glad, and getting to talk. And these interviews have been, for the most part, they've been pretty intimate. You know, they've really been conversations like what you and I are having right now, which aren't just about facts. They're really about feelings too. More about feelings than facts, I think. So that's a beginning of an explanation of how I'm doing. How about you?
I'm doing well. I have so many things to be grateful for. Blessed, my family's healthy. But I've learned so much about myself, not only because of COVID, but because of this project too. When we got the idea to talk and to visit with people, I didn't realize that it would be so emotional. I didn't realize the connection that we would develop, not only with the team of folks, but also with the people that we were talking to. And I think that is an amazing gift, and I will forever be grateful for this project. And this project has opened up areas I didn't know that I didn't know. And the other part of how am I doing is I love the fact, now maybe this is gonna sound bad, I love the fact that the whole world is doing this at the same time. And that is, as isolated as you might feel and things you can't do, it brings me solace to say everybody truly is trying to do their best. And I hope that I can be more gracious and understanding of other people. So that's kind of my personal growth. You know, when we started this, I was an empty nester and had all this unlimited time and could do whatever I wanted. And kind of through this, my dad got sick. And then we were forced with a really interesting dilemma. And the dilemma is, and this was personal, and I don't have any judgments for how anybody else may have handled this, but for me, I couldn't be that person that put my dad in a nursing home in the middle of a pandemic. For a number of reasons, one of which he wouldn't have made it. He just didn't have that mindset. So Pa came to live with us, and he's been an interesting experience. He's at my sister's for a couple months now, and we're going to kind of trade off. But having to explain the pandemic to somebody who is ill and elderly and not at their best has been a real personal challenge. To explain, I know you want to go to lunch, but you can't go. I know that Roasties has been there for 35 years, but you don't get to go to Roasties anymore because they're closed. And having to literally had to drive him to places to say, okay, as he got better, he wanted to go out more. So sure, I'll take you there. The old guy gets out, goes to the door, and then comes back, and his mask is all cattywampus, and he can't breathe with it, and all this stuff. So it's just been a different perspective. I think that we need to start asking people about child rearing through the COVID, because I kind of feel like
yes,
he's a child in some regards, with just being so naive about what's happening. So. But I'm good. I really think that I've tried to be mindful and to be self-reflective of, there's only a few times in life that I've allowed myself to look at myself. It's oftentimes you look at yourself based on the way others see you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really allowed myself to look at myself through my own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And not everything I saw was amazing or wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw it. And then I started making little commitments. I am not the most patient person in the world. I'm not huggy. I'm not super emotional. And I think just reflecting that, how do I give that to somebody else? I may not need that, but it is my responsibility to be present in meetings. It's no longer okay to sit on my phone and text to somebody else while you and I are here in this conversation. So I really try to be mindful about making sure other people know they matter.
Attention.
Mm-hmm.
To circle back, you may have already answered this in an indirect way, but you said you didn't know what you didn't know. Do you care to elaborate about that?
There's just been a lot of times when you think you know what's going on in your community, you think you know what's going on, and all of a sudden you have these beliefs, and your beliefs really are challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been challenged. And as you know, I live in Weld County, Colorado, and in Weld County, they have chosen to work through the pandemic differently than all other counties in Colorado, and it's really been laissez-faire. And so because of that approach, all the adjoining communities, they haven't necessarily adhered to that. So you have one group of professionals saying one thing, you have another group of professionals saying something else, and then I have a board asking me, so what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know. It's all uncharted territory.
Mm-hmm.
So I've probably learned through this that I've learned more when I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, obviously, you learn more through failure, and I don't want to fail. And so spent a lot of time not failing. And through this, I've been a little uncomfortable. I mean, just with the uncertainty of life. And it's really challenged me to say, well, okay, be uncomfortable. And what's important?
Yeah. Since I arrived here in August, almost every night, Nancy and I meditate together for 40 minutes. And pretty much what that comes down to, it's silent. And it's sitting with whatever comes up, especially discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying, okay, there that is. I can't make it go away. I can't control the world. And if we're ever clear that we can't control the world, this pandemic demonstrates that. So I think it's been for a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to doing more re-interviews. I've only done a couple so far. They've been hard to schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But my sense is people have gone inward. They're more introspective. Now, what that's going to mean in the longer run, we know the world's going to change.
Right.
But how have people changed? And maybe they'll just sort of push this all down and say, that was the worst year of my life, and let's get on with things. And nothing changes. But
I love what you just said, and resiliency,
yeah.
and how people are able to adapt. Mark, could you imagine a year ago if I said, hey, don't forget you have to have your mask when you go out?
Yeah.
What would you have told me then?
Yeah.
And now it's commonplace. Now
Right.
it's a commonplace to have a mask as it is to wear a pair of socks.
Yeah.
How can we change so rapidly, and adapt to what's happening? And then we've done it a couple different times.
Well, and that's one of the things that's been so wonderful about these interviews is seeing the wide range of people who've all said, okay, that's what we do now. I mean, we've been talking mostly to healthcare workers and professionals. And I say, that's what life is now. Okay, what do we do? Although one of the people I interviewed more recently, a couple of people have just had it. They're just saying, it's like PTSD, especially when this first came around, when there was way less infection than we have right now. But there was also less guidance. And so everybody was figuring out from day to day, with changing guidelines coming from the CDC and everybody, how to do what they were doing. Now people have fallen into a routine, including doing things by telemedicine. But they're saying, how much longer do we have to keep this up? They're just tired. And I've talked to a couple people who've just said, boy, when this is over, I'm over. Other people who are later in their careers.
And I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see this exodus of people who have traditionally been in one role and have functioned admirably during the pandemic. And they're going to come back and say, I'm not going to do that. And I think we're going to see it in healthcare, education, and hopefully that their impact and what's happened will make us stronger and better. And I ask people, what's the one skill you've learned during the pandemic? What have you learned? And most people say, I have learned to be comfortable on Zoom. No, Zoom, just for the record, Zoom is not a new tool.
Right.
Zoom was seen as a tool for years and years, and it went from a tool to a necessity. And in that transition of tooling to becoming commonplace, people had to make that mindset that I'm comfortable with us.
Yeah. Well, the first time they showed a movie in Paris, and it was of waves rolling in from the ocean, and people got up and ran out of the theater in panic. Likewise with the telephone, the word hello was invented for the telephone because you didn't have the visual image of the person in front of you, so that you knew how formally or informally you could address them. And so hello became just kind of a neutral greeting. It didn't even exist. It had to be created for the telephone. But all these things become just transparent to us very quickly. And Zoom is too. It's very natural for you and I to be sitting here talking to each other.
What have you found as the biggest tragedy throughout this whole experience?
The biggest tragedy, of course, is all the people who are stuck in nursing homes or wherever. I have a good friend who's old friend who's I think she's 90. Yeah, she had her 90th birthday party from her room on the 6th floor of a high-rise nursing home in Chicago, with her family drawing chalk pictures on the driveway for her. And she's been stuck in, and she's an amazing woman and is, held up, but she's been stuck in her room this whole time. I think the biggest tragedy is the physical isolation of people. And for so many people, I've got Nancy, and I've got my sister and brother-in-law and cousins who until recently, we would at least get together socially distanced. And I'm actually going to go out to lunch in an outdoor place with my brother-in-law today. But that physical isolation, you know, and the people who were dying alone, I think that's the biggest tragedy. I think in the longer term, what worries me about us as a society, in the beginning especially, when I'd interview people who were working in rural Colorado, which is who most of our interviewees have been, and there was this wonderful sense of, we're all in this together, we're a community, we're going to get through it. And people were doing parades by the windows of the nursing home, and you know, sending treats for the staff 3 times a day and whatever. And the communities are getting tired too. I'm hearing not just from the workers, but that one of the reasons, I think, for the terrible surge we have with a higher incidence of the pandemic, of the disease than ever, is it just fatigue, just the general fatigue, and the things that have supported us. I worry about them breaking down and not recovering very well. The sense of community, which is really what sustained us. Mm-hmm. Have you encountered that in your re-interviews?
I have, and the other underlying theme that is new to me and unexpected is grief. And people are weary, but so many people are very much internalizing and feeling grief. Now, we've lost, I don't know, I can't even tell you how many people have actually died because of this, because I'm not sure which numbers to believe, but any life's a tragedy, any loss. But I think the sense of community is changing a little bit from we can do this and we've got this to everybody's been impacted. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you have children at home, whether or not you have social isolation, you have a parent come live with you that you weren't anticipating. All of that kind of results in a sense of grief and loss mm-hmm. from what it was before.
Right.
I think there'll be research done on what happens when your whole community is experiencing grief at the same time. And we can't look away from children who are, the suicide rates are increasing exponentially, not only for children, but something that we're really looking at, and that how much of that is because of the grief and hopelessness. Yeah. A little bit is coming through.
Right now, we're in the midst of the third wave, just to put this in time for anybody in the future who's looking at this. So we're over 300,000 deaths in the United States right now. We're also just a few days after the release of a week after the release of the first vaccine and a day after the release of the second vaccine by Pfizer and Moderna, respectively. But they're saying that there's going to be a fourth wave of mental health issues that will put the first 3 pandemic waves, make them look minor by comparison, that we've been so shook. Now, sometimes being shook is good because then you rebuild. I'm hoping that that's what we do. We've certainly we've changed presidents. We have a president who's willing to address these issues. But it's going to take way more than that. It's going to take a sort of, I think, a rebirth, and you have that opportunity after a shared tragedy. so what can we do? And we could even look at this. What can we do as CAHEC? I mean, now we're concentrating on, we've pivoted to concentrate on getting people to do the immunizations and try to get through resistance to immunizing that's out there. But I have a feeling that the reverberations of this will keep CAHEC in business for a long, long time.
I think so too, and I think our focus will broaden in some regards. We have rural high schools in our region that the high schools are closed only because they have no staff. The staff's all been sick, and at some point in time, we need to ask some of these really hard questions. Why do we allow that to happen? Why don't we have the resources that we need in areas to really build good communities? And we're confronted in a lot of ways with choices that have been made by prior political representatives, leadership. We're now faced with that. And I hope that people are looking at that saying, if I liked how things have happened, that's great. And if not, I should do something different. I should advocate for change. And hopefully CAHEC, we can put ourselves in that space so that we're helping, being a partner in this way. I don't think we should lead it. I don't think we should follow it. I think our role as a community agency is to be a partner and to really see where they're hurting, what we can do about it.
And to do what we've been doing with this project, which is to listen.
Yeah.
And to feel.
One thing I do want to tell you, one of the hardest things for me personally has been, as you know, I've always, I have an ongoing hearing loss. And I always knew that it would get worse. I just didn't think that it would get worse during a pandemic when you didn't have the resources that normally were there to get help and to work on this issue. And then there was the guilt of, oh, I'm not really sick. I can't hear you, but I'm not really sick, and I'm not going to go because there's a lot of people that are really sick out there who really need this attention. So we have a whole group of people that I think have deferred.
That's right.
And medical issues that, yes, it's not life-threatening, but it's probably annoying that I couldn't be seen for months and months. And so, so that's been really interesting. The other thing is I'm really disappointed in our society. I'm disappointed in our society, and this is just Monica being selfish, is that, yes, we should wear masks, and everybody should do that. But what do you do about the people who need to watch your lips? What do I do about the people who can't hear? And I have been confronted with so many rude people that when I have their mask on and I hear, and I will repeat it. Did you say this? Or I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. And it's perceived as being flippant or not listening. And I found myself saying, I apologize. I'm sorry. I have a hearing impairment. Can you please move your mask down so I can read your lips? Hi, I never thought I thought we were better as a society, that we were accommodating people with all these special needs. And I was at the airport and I was reading what was approved for face masks. And you cannot have a face mask that has plastic over your mouth. Mm-hmm. I'm like, where are the advocacy groups for some people that have, I mean, there's a lot of people who can't hear. There's a lot of seniors that can't hear. Where are those people? And why aren't we sending that message of somebody, don't just assume it's a political statement. If somebody says, will you please move your mask down? I really can't hear you. That's,
Yeah, we've really been more than ever distanced from each other, and distanced from listening to each other. And at my age, I have much less in the way of ideas about broad political solutions. And I'm more and more just saying, how do I instantiate this in my own life? How do I walk the walk as consistently as I can? And what kind of waves of influence does that have? And that's one of the lovely things, again, I think about CAHEC and our rural focus and our regional focus is we really can and do have an influence. And it's these sorts of things. It's much less programs, or solutions, I should say. You know, there aren't easy solutions to any of this stuff. But if attitudes change, I think that's the best we can do.
I think so. And do you remember early on one of the interviews, and I can't remember who it was who said this, but they said that 2020 will be known as the year that we all took a time out.
Yeah.
And those words have resonated with me throughout this whole project, that this is a timeout. And hopefully the reset, we can help gear the reset. And it's okay. I feel like I'm sitting in the chair, you know, facing the wall, and I'm in my good timeout and all this stuff. But after the timeout, we have a lot of work to do, I think. But
by the way, when I meditate, I face the wall.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
But for all of us who've had children, we also understand more important than the timeout is how you handle the aftermath.
Yes.
How do you contextualize it in a way that it leads to, it's more than just behavior, to being better.
Yeah.
Not just acting better, but being better.
And understanding. Yeah. And I think we've looked at acceptance. And I think we focused throughout the last few months on acceptance. What does that mean of each other? And how come I've been telling everybody that this year for Christmas and Hanukkah, I am giving grace. So I'm giving you grace.
Yeah. And last night was the last night, so you're going to have to save it for.
Oh, okay. So now I have to get your Christmas.
For Christmas,
okay.
I mean, I'll still take Christmas gifts too.
Okay. So now your Christmas gift is grace.
Yeah. I'm non-denominational.
And I've been telling people that, and they stop and think, can you do that? Like, yeah, it's 2020. I'm giving grace.
Let me tell you about something I've been thinking about in relation to all of this. Now, remember, I grew up in Chicago, and I landed in Yuma, Colorado, population 2,000, when I was in my late 20s in the National Service Corps. And that was the hardest transition I've ever made. Way harder than the year of college I spent at the University of Madrid in Catholic fascist Spain. Speaking Spanish all the time. Yuma was much more foreign to me than a city and being in a university, albeit in Spain. And coming from the city, I also understand the city-country divide. I mean, all you had to do was look at the electoral map that they were showing on election night, and the whole country was red except around all of the cities, which were all blue. Well, I came with a lot of the same prejudices that are not unexamined. Just as we're still examining things about racism, there are prejudices about rural people that, you know, they're just not, you know, they're not that bright, they're not very hip, da 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 da. The rural culture is kind of impoverished. That I had to live to understand the other side of, and feel really blessed to have learned that. And my children were really blessed to have gotten doses of both the rural and the urban. So here we're in Weld County, where the commissioners are just being, who you used to work for, are just being as probably the most stupid group of people in the state right now, by completely refusing to even acknowledge that there's a pandemic. I mean, even in their own offices, people don't wear masks. And mask wearing, as Matt said the other day, has become a political statement, whether you do or you don't, or it's a sense of identity, whether you do. Well, those things are really hard to change. That sense of identity. The other day, I was walking. Actually, another time in this neighboring suburb, I'd had lunch with my sister and brother-in-law at a restaurant, and was walking by another one that had outdoor tables with these little plastic shells around them, and the door of one had blown open, and so I went to close it, and there were two women in there, and one of them, and I'm out walking outside, said, "You're not wearing a mask," and and I wasn't, because I was outside and there was no reason to, and I was really nice and still closed the door for them. And I realized what it is that's going on. There's this judging each other that's going on, and I really see, and that's an important part of the work with CAHEC, I think. That's what we have to break down. I think, you know, what I was saying about community and seeing community among the people, especially early in the pandemic, in the small towns, they did it. They had their shit together. They just did it. And I think one of the reasons why they react so strongly to what they call the coastal elites, although Chicago's not on the coast, for example, is they already get what community is. They already do it. You don't do it so much in the city. It's natural to them. Well, if we're losing that as a result of the pandemic in the country, in the small towns, this is what we have to offer America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the future.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the future going to look like? Do you remember years ago when Greeley had the slogan "Unexpected"?
Yeah.
I thought that was stupid. I thought so. If my expectation was that you are an amazing place, and you turn out not to be, that's unexpected, right? But the pandemic has been unexpected.
Yeah.
And has resulted in, I think, such great opportunities. I mean, I have to say, I haven't lost anyone, and I'm sure that changes your whole perspective of it. But I've tried to stay positive throughout all of this, and I found that when I was positive, others around me tended to be positive and not so negative. And I think that just having that positive, we can do this attitude is infectious. And so I think we're going to be okay, but I do think we'll be different. I think that hopefully we'll learn from this. Hopefully, if nothing else, we'll figure out who does know what they're doing. I mean, who should you be listening to? Does it make sense that you have different people representing healthcare issues, and the message is so completely different. It's not, oh, they're doing it a certain way. It's either this or this.
Right.
And I think most people live in the middle.
Yeah.
Most people want to be here, and we're getting these two messages on both sides. And I think people, they're tired of that. They want to say, no, give me the facts. Let me make a good decision. Don't make them for me, because I'm country and we don't like that. But give me good facts. And I hope that some of the work that we've done and that we'll continue to do will help with that. Just give me the facts, ma'am. All I need, and it's unexpected.
Yeah. Well, with CAHEC's pivot now to doing the vaccine promotion, I think what we have to offer more than anything else is our own rural and, if you will, very regional take on how do you deliver that
Well,
in a way that's heard.
It is hard, but here's a great example. Lincoln County, Colorado, small spot on the planet. They have an amazing outreach effort. And so anybody who doesn't understand that these rural communities are trying to help themselves and they're trying to get good information. And I think we can do better with giving them information so then they can tell it to their communities in the best manner that it will be adopted and it'll be accepted. So I do think we have a lot of work to do. You and I only have a couple more minutes before we run out of our time. We've talked so much. But thank you. Thanks for being my friend and just challenging me. You and I are really different. We're different people, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be challenged and to question things. And I think it works both ways for us, and I appreciate that.
Well, as I said earlier, and I want to put this on the record, you're a great boss and a great leader because of the amount of freedom to create that all of us on this project have had, and the support we've had for doing it. And I think and I would like to see it. What we were talking about just now about the after effects when this is over. It's not going to be over. I'd like to see this go on for a while and assess, maybe even in a year after the last case. So where are people now, and when they look back on it, how have they changed, and how have they changed what they do? It's been really good to go through this with you.
Thank you.
And with CAHEC, because like I said, and I think, it's so interesting because in the times that I worked in so many capacities in rural places, besides practicing as a teacher and a program developer and stuff like that, it always seemed to me that the biggest challenge, especially for professionals, was isolation and the sense of isolation. This has helped me with my own sense of isolation here on the fringes of a big city. Technology is a big piece of that. We're figuring out how to use that. That's why I've been interested in technology for so long. It's been such a trip. And I'm so glad to have been taking this trip with you. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah.